All right, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, striking up the live stream. We have mentioned many times here that we need some Oregon football talk. And so therefore, we have reached out to Ryan Winter. You can join him on Sports Chat 503. You could have quizzed me, Ryan, on the area code out there. I wouldn't have been able to get it, but that'll be locked and loaded now. Appreciate you jumping on board.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, man. I appreciate it.
So, Ryan, before we dive into the Ducks and the current status of the program and the personnel and so forth, want to know a little bit more about your deal. We talked a little bit about it before we came on live, just where people can find you and what you do.
Right. Well, I'm on a Sports Chat 503, like you said, Mark, there. And then I'm on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, all those little things. But my main thing is that I'm from Oregon. I grew up in Oregon, third generation Duck. My boy hopefully will be fourth generation. And we just do the thing. We're really excited about it. We always have been excited about it. This isn't like a really new thing. There was a huge buzz about college football around Oregon, basically since around the 1990s. And since then, we've done some pretty big things every once in a while. Haven't won the big one, obviously, yet, but hopefully in the future we get that going. So I go to the games. I go to all the season tickets. I'm a season ticket holder, so I go to all the regular season games. I go to the bowl game as well. I go to some road games if it's close, Washington or Corvallis. I film the games and I upload those videos online, so you get some game film. I get some little highlight films from the area, and then I break down each week Ducks, Pac-12, and national video.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So, Ryan, when did you start watching Oregon football exactly?
I was born on campus, so like Rich Brooks was 1978. Rich Brooks was started, so I've been in for a while, yeah.
That's right. So, obviously, other than the last few years, it's basically been an upward trajectory. You mentioned going through the 90s and improving and increasing, and reaching the Rose Bowl in 1994 wasn't necessarily expected at that point, and it was a bit of a spike. And then Mike Bellotti, of course, had his success, and then it really took off after there. You probably saw a spike in attention and popularity, about 10 years ago again?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's kind of been some different spikes. We had that Joey Harrington spike. Joey was a year younger than me, growing up in Portland, and he had that billboard and the Heisman billboard in New York City. They made a real big deal about that. We got the O. That was a big deal when Tinker Design helped design the O with Nike. The O, little known fact, is the inside of it is the track at Hayward Field. The outside of it is actually the shape of Autzen Stadium. So it actually is meaningful. It's not just an O. It's actually a design of like where our past is and where our future is. So, yeah, Chip was a game changer. Obviously, when Chip came, the whole thing exploded and got super exciting. Holy moly, it was most fun thing to watch. Kind of like when the St. Louis Rams started their thing with that greatest show on turf. Started to go real fast and not play much defense. And then we got up against teams like Auburn and Ohio State, and we just couldn't hang with them, and so we just couldn't get over that hump. Now Chip's back. He's in the Pac-12. I think everything's evened out since now. But, yeah, man, the popularity of Oregon is still pretty strong, I think.
Yeah, striking up the live chat here on Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, focusing on those Oregon Ducks. I've said for a long time here we have needed an Oregon guest for sure, and we're joined by Ryan Winter. You can join him on Sports Chat 503. And Ryan, this is pretty typical of these chats that I have going live here when I have a guest on, typically about, regardless of the team, unless it's a few out there, 20% pro. And then, of course, you're going to catch the flack of the cat calls of 4220 and elsewhere. But you already addressed that. And I... that was pretty much the narrative there, is that a lot of people thought you guys were too quick in space for some of those teams approaching those postseason games. And then it just turned into a situation where maybe they were just as fast, obviously had a load of NFL talent, but a little bit more in the trenches when you've run into LSU, Ohio State, and Auburn, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I think Oregon was just really close. They were trying to go a little gimmicky, call it what you want, kind of like the Princeton offense. Can't really hang with the big boys. We played against Penn State, one of their best teams of all time. Played against Auburn, one of their best teams of all time. Played against Ohio State, one of their best teams of all time. So it's just the luck of the draw sometimes. We thought we had a really good shot against Ohio State. Came off that huge win against Florida State. I went to both those games with my whole family. And we were so excited after that Florida State win. It was one of the most epic wins in our whole program's history. Had the season ended right there, that would have been one of the all-time greatest times of all time. But 1 week later, we're in Dallas in a very cold Dallas night, and we thought we had a good shot with it. We had the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. We had everything going, but we had a couple key things go wrong for us. So we had the wide receiver get busted for weed. Now weed's legal. But we had the other wide receiver, who was Devin Allen, who was a track star, blew his ACL in the first kickoff of the first game. So here we are, we're losing our first 2 wide receivers. We just couldn't move the ball against Ohio State. And then the Zeke Elliott show took over, and we couldn't stop him, nor really could anybody else in the NFL as a rookie either. So it just is what it is, you know.
And if I remember correctly, you had a number of dropped passes in the first half of that game on wide open plays that would have busted clean as well. And
yeah, first drive was good. It felt like we scored early, and then it was just over. Yeah.
Yeah, and you were facing basically an NFL team.
You got to tip the cap to Ohio State, too. Ohio State's a great team. There's no love lost there. We get a home and home with them as well in the next 3 years. We're going to go to Columbus and play. They're going to come to Autzen and play. So it's going to be a huge thing.
This is what I love here. Ryan and I have never talked. He comes on talking Oregon football. He loves his team. He loves everything that happened here with the Ducks here in the last 40 years and so forth. He knows his history, obviously, having grown up on campus, and he is entrenched, but he is not blind. And he tells it like it is and gives a great perspective.
Yeah, I think there's a misconception with some of those hardcore fans that spend a lot of time online. They kind of bleed the system red with, you know, this, that, or the other. But I really do think at the end of the day, most fans are pretty reasonable. When you go to the stadium and you see the old timers that have put a lot of money into it, they've been there every single year. They know what's going on. The big difference, I would say, this year with this coaching staff as opposed to the other ones is the weight room. I felt like Chip didn't put weight room as a priority, and I definitely think that Mark Helfrich didn't put weight room as a priority. And you saw that. You saw that when he went up against Auburn. You saw that when he went up against Ohio State. Those guys were much bigger, much stronger all the way through the game.
You were listening to Ryan Winter from Sports Chat 503 talking Oregon football, also gives his perspective on the Pac-12 and his take from around the nation. Somebody asking me here on the chat to ask you what Oregon's going to do. Glad I have these people, Ryan, to help me produce. I would have never gotten around to that.
Yeah, that's a great one. Well, this year we have no idea going into it. I think we got a pretty soft schedule. I think that's pretty beneficial to it. Everybody looks at the schedule. And then we got the big quarterback. We got the quarterback coming back. He's on ESPN or CBS Sports, wherever you get your sports, Fox Sports. He's everywhere. The quarterback is a junior, Justin Herbert. The kid's a local kid. He got hurt as a junior and senior kind of. He played baseball and played football, but he got kind of dinged his junior and senior year in high school. Didn't really get recruited as much, but the kid looks the part. 6'5", he can run. But the key thing is that this place has always run the ball. Oregon football, since we've been successful with Mike Bellotti, even going back to Rich Brooks, has produced really good running backs all the way through. This year, we've got some interesting running backs. We've got a senior, Tony Brooks-James. He's our workhorse. But then we have some backups that we really don't know what we're going to get. Redshirt freshmen, a galore. So the running back, we have no idea about. The wide receivers look good. The quarterback looks good. And other than that, I feel like the weight room looks good. Everything I've seen in the offseason has been weight room, weight room, weight room. All the videos are coming from there. The guys looked much bigger in the spring game. And I just went from the Vegas Bowl to the spring game. They looked bigger. So I think this year, let's say the high side, maybe like 9 wins. But realistically, you're probably looking at about 6, 7 wins, maybe 8 wins, trying to get in that little second tier bowl. You know, last year we were in the Vegas Bowl. If we can move up to a better bowl this next year, possibly even get a crack at a big one, we'll take it.
So, Ryan, I cut a video a couple of weeks ago. I was looking at what I consider to be the top 10 dark horses across the nation. Yeah. I put Oregon at number 1. The reason I did that was I looked at the schedule and I saw some opportunities there in regards to home games against the better teams. You can look at that one way or the other. Either you're going to still lose to the Stanfords and Washingtons, regardless of where you play them, or it's the opportunity to pull off a couple upsets. You have the easy non-conference slate. I think somebody ducked out of a matchup earlier.
Yes.
And what I like about this team, and I checked a number of sites, I looked at the metrics on SB Nation, is that Jim Leavitt comes over. He improved this defense considerably. Like we're talking like plus 70 in the nation a couple of years ago in terms of the metrics that matter, not just the total
Yes.
yards, but like a top 25 to 30 defense. And you've not necessarily, if I get this straight, are you fully loaded in the depth chart too deep, but you have some just tremendous 3 or 4 players on defense.
Yeah, I think the defense is pretty young. The identity is young. It all starts, in my opinion, with the guys in the middle. Jordan Scott was the freshman All-American kid, was a great player from Florida, real big kid in high school. Lost a lot of weight, lost 30 pounds even almost before his freshman year coming in and transitioning in. And then Troy Dye up the middle, man, the linebacker. The kid is an absolute stud. His little brother has now come on as a running back. Who's a freshman, but those are the guys up the middle. Lamar Winston's really big, Portland area kid, went to Central Catholic. And then the cornerbacks, everybody on this team is young. They're all sophomores for the most part, or they're redshirt. And then you got the guy off the end, Jalen Jelks. I think he's one of the guys to really watch for, a defensive end. We've had some success with some defensive ends going back a little bit. We had Deion Jordan, obviously, went to the 3rd pick, and he had some ups and downs in the NFL with everything else. But then we had Eric Armstead and then DeForest Buckner back to back. And both those guys played that end position, played that rush end, real tall. Jalen Jelks, 6'7". I mean, this could be a real good defense this year.
All right, we're on the line with Ryan Winter. You can catch him on a Sports Chat 503 talking Oregon football primarily, although he gives his look at the Pac-12 and the nation. Is the uniform situation pretty much still the same? Still coming up with crazy combinations, and is that going to keep going?
I think the most important thing I think that people really do miss with Oregon is Oregon's the test kitchen for Nike. So anything that Nike does, they start at Oregon. So when Nike got the NFL contracts, the Nike uniform that went to the NFL, Oregon was wearing like 2 or 3 years before it, testing it out. Oregon's just like a test lab for them. And I think Oregon really loves that relationship. I think there might even be better relationships with Nike around the country. Nike and Ohio State have a gigantic relationship, and nobody wants to talk about them, right? But I do think that Oregon is the laboratory for Nike. So sometimes they test out different colors or different fabrics or different approaches to different types of uniforms. I think that keeps it fresh. I do think the gear is a big selling point to kids. I think that historically, you go back to the 1970s and 80s, you'd get one T-shirt that said football on it. Maybe it said your number. Now these kids leave with laundry bags, huge, gigantic bags full of gear, shirts, pants, hats, everything. So I think that the Nike gear is a really big deal for them. Footwear, it starts with footwear. And I think that Nike is a great company. We're really big supporters of Nike in Portland, obviously. And I think that the University of Oregon loves the relationship they have with them.
Talking Oregon football, we've got Ryan Winter on the line from Sports Chat 503. People on the line are asking, I've got a number of Miami fans chiming in. DJ Johnson's a transfer coming into Oregon. I don't know that he's going to be eligible this year. Where do we stand on that? I don't know yet.
I think that might be one of those that we're going to get waiting. And at the last second, they'll give us notification. But definitely the fans from Miami, I'd like to say thank you. Mario Cristobal is a guy who absolutely I think is a game changer here. Every single time that guy speaks, it makes me want to hit the weight room. The guy is just the classic prototypical coach. I think he's going to go from an offensive lineman perspective, and I think it's going to be back to 3 yards cloud of dust.
So that was going to be the next topic on the docket, having an inexperienced head coach at this level. It's been a head coach at the group of 5 level, but you obviously have started with a ringing endorsement.
I mean, just his attitude alone, family, everything else, he's really adopted into Eugene. People love him. And, I was not really anti-Willie Taggart. Willie Taggart had the dream job open up. I was really excited he came out here. I was a guy that was kind of entrenched with the old coaching staff because that's all we knew. Oregon hasn't really changed coaching staffs very much. And so it was kind of a tough time for Oregon to go through a whole coaching staff upheaval. But I think we're on the right track now. We got some really good assistant coaches as well. Talk about Jim Leavitt. That guy's basically a head coach on the defense. And having him come back this last year was one of the biggest pickups we had. We thought he possibly might go to another team. So I'm really, really happy with Cristobal. I'm really happy with Arroyo, the offensive coordinator as as well, and then Leavitt as well. So.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, bringing on the best bloggers, broadcasters, and writers in the nation for the best discussion, debate, and analysis, talking Oregon with Ryan Winter. So before we move on to the Pac-12, you brushed through the offense. I don't know if you stopped at wide receiver. I think you gave us a general take on the wide receiver, but any specific names we need to look out for?
Well, there's a guy, Brendan Schooler. I don't know if he's going to start or not, but he was a defensive guy when he came in. He's looked pretty good. He, along with some other guys, again, pretty young team, sophomores, juniors for the most part. Taj Griffin's the real big one to me. He's the guy that everybody on this side really gets excited when he has his hands on the ball, but for whatever reason, he just doesn't get the ball in his hands that much. So Johnny Johnson III, Dylan Mitchell is going to be our big wide receivers. And then I think the big one is going to be the tight end. Jacob Breland looks to be having a great year. The way that they're going to work the tight end in this year, I think is going to be really big.
So, Ryan, we're coming off a season in which the Pac-12 didn't look so good in postseason play, did take on some of the better teams in the country, specifically out of the Big Ten. 1-7 was the record, of course.
Yeah.
This was a conference that if you didn't necessarily buy into the groupthink of the SEC, and I do believe that the SEC is still most likely the best conference, has the best talent, but certainly I was not going to argue that the SEC was the best conference in college football for about 7 or 8 years, but I didn't think that the gap was as great as the national media group think. I thought people needed to dig a little bit closer, a little bit deeper. So the closest I thought that somebody took a shot at the SEC, if you look at top to bottom conference, was 2014. In 2014, the Pac-12 played as well against the other 4 conferences as anybody. They were like 13-6 in meaningful games in like-seeded matchups. And of course, Oregon went all the way to the national championship game, but it just seems to have changed. And it's still a deep conference. It's not awful at the bottom like it is in a few other conferences, but it just doesn't seem to have that team or two that can challenge the likes of the powerhouses elsewhere.
Yeah, I think the key thing is, in college football is consistency. Oregon had a pretty good run there. Washington has had their run. USC obviously is kind of up and down sometimes, but I think Stanford's the most consistent team of the whole bunch. I think Stanford every single year goes out and recruits the best players from the best schools in the country. They get the 4-point student who's the absolute stud athlete. They never really do much wrong outside of the classroom or anything. They're just a brilliant team. They go, I mean, who doesn't like their power lineup when they put the offensive lineman in as a H back, and they have the whole thing lined up. It's 8-9 deep on the line, and they power you through. I mean, that's just old school football. Why not? I think that there's some interesting teams in the Pac-12. Washington right now is probably our best team, but I think they're going to be really in for a tough one. Their schedule is rough this year. I think Stanford, if they could figure their quarterback situation out, whenever they get a good quarterback, I think they're a national team, kind of like what Oregon is right now. Yeah, I agree with you on the dark horse. I think whoever wins the North wins the Pac-12. I think it's either Stanford, it's Washington, or it's Oregon. I really don't know about USC this year. I don't know about UCLA in the transition with Chip. I really don't know about what's going to happen down at Arizona and Arizona State. Arizona had a really weird year last year. They had at one point in time, Khalil Tate looked like the absolute runaway Heisman for a time, with unstoppable. And then when he played us, our quarterback ran for more yards than he did. So you never know what's going to go on. And then bringing in Kevin Sumlin, I don't know what's going to go happen there. Or Oregon State is obviously the low end of the thing. And I think if you compare our bottom end with the bottom end of a SEC or of a Big Ten, I think they're all kind of the same. But I tend to think the Big Ten is one of the better teams in the country in the last couple of years. I really like Wisconsin. I think Michigan is every single week is really competitive. Obviously, Ohio State runs the show there. But I think they've got some pretty good teams there as well. I think top to bottom, Pac-12 is one of the best conferences in football. I don't think you can say that with the SEC because there's just so many teams. I think the top end looks really good, and I think the bottom end does not look that good at all in the SEC. So
Ryan, you think the SEC is not as good as the Pac-12?
No. I think the SEC is the best conference
Okay.
in football, but I think there are so many teams. There's 16 teams. So, I mean, they have 4 extra teams that could be worse than possibly than our. So when you look at teams like Vanderbilt, they get crushed. Kentucky, my good friend went to Kentucky, set the record there from our school over here in Portland. A tight end named James Whalen went to the pros out of Kentucky. I've always really supported Kentucky as much as I can, but they get hurt every single week. I mean, I think the SEC is a gauntlet, but splitting those teams up last couple of years, you've had kind of 1 or 2 teams at the top, and then you've had a bunch of teams that are kind of mediocre. I mean, Tennessee up and down. Tennessee used to be great, but where have they been in the last 5-10 years? So I think you can find these teams in each division that are kind of just wishy-washy. Hopefully Oregon does not become one of those teams. It looks like they are in the last couple of years. That's what we're kind of paranoid about right now.
Yeah, it does. So you came off the national championship game and went to the Alamo Bowl, correct? You won 9 games. You went to the Alamo Bowl, had that exciting game, blew the big lead.
Yeah, lost the Alamo. I think it was the largest bowl game deficit that was overtaken in the second. I think it was like a record.
Then you only won like 4 games, and then you came back to win 7 and get to a bowl game last year.
Lost the coach completely. Yeah, it just imploded. It just imploded. It feels like we're back on track a little bit to get back to the top of the Pac-12 North. If we can be on the top of the Pac-12 North, in essence, we're on the top of the Pac-12 again.
And just want to correct you on one note, and I don't want you to hear it from the chat here. Not that you're looking at it. 14 teams in the SEC.
Oh, 14. Okay, yeah. My bad.
So folks are asking about Michael Johnson. This is obviously a kid you'd really love to get, this Michael Johnson Jr., quarterback who's looking at Penn State, Miami, Oregon in particular, 5th-rated dual-threat quarterback, a #1 player in the state, according to the 247 composite.
Yeah, and word on the street is he doesn't want to go to Oregon. So you get the dad, and again, the way it looked was kind of shady, where you try to get the dad, it feels like, to try to get the son, maybe. I'm a coach of my son on the youth team, and I understand that my son probably doesn't want to play for me either. So I get that. But yeah, the kid is an unbelievable talent. He can do whatever he wants to do at the end of the day. I really do think it's a unique situation with the timing right now. But I also do think with Herbert leaving in the next 2 years, but I do think that there's a lot of other quarterbacks that are coming out to Oregon that are going to be pretty successful as well. So you never know how the competition works once you get on campus.
How do Oregon people feel about Chip Kelly? Now that he's back in the conference, how did they feel about him once he went off to the pros? How is that pendulum swung in regards to obviously being the guy that would be considered the best coach in program history? Yeah. Certainly nobody's approached his winning percentage, but since then, going to the pros is one thing. Now going to UCLA is another.
Yeah, I think the mass really supports Chip. I think that they wanted him to do well in the NFL. I think that first year he did okay, and then they just kind of the wheels fell off. And I think that him going to UCLA, I think people are kind of hoping for the best, but obviously not against Oregon. But I tend to think that the ship has sailed. I tend to think the cat's out of the bag, whatever metaphor you want to use. Last year, Nick Saban won with basically halfway of a spread offense, it feels like. And when they needed to go real strong, 3rd down, they needed to get the 1st down, needed to move the chains, they spread it out and they went option half the time. So, and that was a guy that was just adamant against it. So I feel like Chip did change the game a little bit, but now what? And so I don't know what he's going to do down there. I really don't. I think it's a major question mark. I think UCLA is a tough place to recruit in the shadow of USC. And I think that it's going to be difficult down there. I think that UCLA always gets good talent, but for whatever reason, they have not been that successful in their football program.
Yeah, it's a mystery to me. I know that they've got to compete against USC, as you mentioned, but the weather and the locale and everything else going for it, I would think that UCLA would do much better and would have had a better history of football success than they have. I was looking at recruiting rankings. So we did a big UCLA show a couple weeks ago with about 3 people on at the same time and kicking around UCLA for like a concentrated 90 minutes. I looked up recruiting rankings. The Chip Kelly 4 years that concluded his Oregon run, his recruiting classes all ranked between 2nd and 4th in the Pac-12, all between about 12th and 20th in the nation. The last 4 UCLA recruiting classes, they look almost exact in regards to, and I don't buy into recruiting rankings for one particular player. Anybody can go off the rails, but that's a volume. And we know from the recruiting rankings, they're pretty accurate across the board in volume. And to look at those two rosters, he might be able to do something there pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean, one would think. I really don't know what's going to happen in the South. The South is such a question mark. I think Utah is going to be better. I think Arizona State's going to be improved. I think Colorado's kind of slowly improving and getting that thing on track. So, I mean, I think the South is going to be tough. It would not surprise me if they really struggled this year. It also wouldn't surprise me if they won like 9 games, and all of a sudden Chip was the hot commodity again. I've seen it happen before. But I do think that when Chip started here, he started as an offensive coordinator that first year with Dennis Dixon and Jonathan Stewart, and it was just magical. That was the year that they beat Michigan up at Michigan, and they were hiding the ball, and nobody knew what was going on, and it was magical. And I think that was a time, that was 10 years ago. So I tend to think that was a time when other people really weren't hip to this. Now they are. Rich Rod's been let go. Chip obviously has moved on. The originators of the spread have kind of moved on, and there's new coaches out there using elements of it, but not as the main focus.
No question about it. And you bring up a great point. Is it going to work as well? This is where we find out if Chip Kelly is truly a great coach that can transcend just this gimmick offense. If he can run the show from the CEO position, obviously find those wrinkles that are going to continue to expand the offense and do some different things and build the program in other ways, like a Steve Spurrier did, who was an offensive show at Florida, went to South Carolina, struggled for a little bit, but actually built his teams on defense and running the football, and wasn't anything innovative offensively from a passing standpoint, but was just a good head coach after that at South Carolina.
I tend to think that's what Chip's going to do. I like the Steve Spurrier idea because also Spurrier had a little at the NFL. And I think if you look at the NFL probably tamed Chip's ideas about the spread. I think Chip will probably come back in not really 100% spread like he was at Oregon.
All right, Ryan Winter on the line, enjoying the Oregon football talk. We have been starved for this for quite some time. You can join him on the Sports Chat 503 here on YouTube and a bunch of other platforms as well, right, Ryan?
Yeah, Instagram, Twitter, I'm there, so you can find me.
Okay, maybe we'll be able to flag you down sometime before or just into August camp, and we can break down personnel and break down the units and so forth. And I really want to ask you about this schedule because I'm not finding 5 or 6 losses here. I think you're going to do better than that.
I agree. I tend to think that Stanford and Washington are the real big ones. We get them both at home. I think that matters at Autzen. I think Autzen tends to be a place that you can still say has a home court advantage. I think at Arizona is going to be a tough one. It's always tough to play at Tucson. And I think at Salt Lake City is going to be tough. It's always difficult playing at Utah. We won at Utah a couple years ago with a fantastic Darren Carrington touchdown at the very end. And then he went to Utah to play against us last year when we kicked him off the team. So it is what it is.
And that was the game in which the Utah kid dropped the ball at the 1-yard line, right?
Unbelievable. Again, unbelievable. And we almost did that in the national championship, Byron Marshall. I mean, what are we doing? Carry the ball, guys.
Yeah, dance all you want and show off, but just take it a couple more steps.
2 more steps, right?
All right, excellent. Good stuff with Ryan Winter again. Sports Chat 503, talking Oregon football. Ryan, you have yourself a great night, and I appreciate you jumping on board.
You as well. Appreciate it, Mark. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Ryan. We'll keep the chat going here for just another second as we let you know that we've got all sorts of content coming your way over the next several days, looking at top positional players across the country. Top 10 quarterbacks, top 10 running backs coming your way tomorrow. Top 5 in the SEC and the ACC at various offensive positions. But I'm going to put the halt on the player breakdowns to get to the team breakdowns. I want to rank the schedules. That's coming your way in just the next few weeks. I've got to collect them all. I've got to build the grid and try to rank them based on comparing like opponents and so forth, and do that. And then we get to the predictions, of course, as we preview every team in the Power 5. And we will get to that soon. Want to let everyone know, some of you have already heard this, that I want I want to nail down a consistent live stream schedule. So it's going to look something like this, starting the week of Sunday, the 15th of July. Sunday, 4 o'clock Eastern time. Monday, 6 o'clock Eastern time. Wednesday and Thursday at 7 o'clock Eastern time. Friday at noon. And then you guys know me. I won't be able to stand it, and I'll have to jump on here a few more times during the week and talk some college football. So again, appreciate the suggestions. Of course, like, comment, and subscribe as always to help me out. And let's see, we just knocked out a USC quarterback battle. I've been given a request of Clemson and Stanford, so I'm going to have to do some homework there. I could do those right now. So if you watch some people online, they'll go on and they'll break down a position or a team, and they really don't know what they're talking about. I could do that with Stanford and with Clemson's quarterbacks right now. I know enough about them. I could sit here and ramble for 10 minutes, but I would like to actually look into it and see what the coaches are saying and what the players and what the spring recap looked like. So I'm going to get you some quality content and review those quarterback battles at Clemson and Stanford. And check out the chat one more time before I let you guys go to see what's going on. But I was glad to get some Oregon content in because we're really lacking in terms of certain teams across the country. Oregon, Wisconsin would be 2. Michigan State, we were doing well several months ago, but not recently. And a few others like Texas A&M and Auburn, I would like to dive into a little bit more. Yeah, not a whole lot of love on the chat for Oregon. We do understand that they did have one bad season and one marginal season. So this program went to a national championship game in 2014. Okay, just reminding everyone of that. 2014. It wasn't 1984. It was 2014. And then 9-4, 4-8, 7-6. Not the worst in the world. We'll see what they got for us with Mario Cristobal, one of the easiest names to make fun of in college football, as you all have proven. NCIS Fanatic 21. Yes, if you would have caught the end of the live stream, the last one that we had this afternoon, I called Glenn Mason, left a message, and hopefully we can catch up with him. He told me to call him during his drive today, and then I would be able to talk with him, but he did not pick up. So we will try Glenn Mason of the Big Ten Network some other time. And as I mentioned earlier today, Peter Burns of the SEC Network and ESPN will join us sometime after July 5th. All right. I don't know what else I can do here. I think we've done enough work. And I will, speaking of that, be off and running tonight and back at it on Tuesday with the top 10 running backs in the nation coming your way next on Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. I appreciate all the support from all the regulars here. And if you're jumping on for the first time, like I see, thought I saw a few names for the first time, maybe not. Those are all the regulars on the chat. You guys are the base there. We got Joseph Holmes. Haven't seen that name before. Joseph, welcome to Mark Rogers TV. Anybody else here? Welcome to Mark Rogers TV. And yes, I will be taking calls. I want to do it the right way. I want to have a second line. I want to do it through Skype, where it's actually the audio comes through clearly and not just sit here and have you call me on the cell phone and put it up to the mic. That's what I would like to do. That's what I'll look into doing. Got some traveling plans this week, so that's a couple weeks away. But phone calls to Mark Rogers TV, the call-in line will be open, and we'll have a whole lot of fun talking college football beyond the live chat. That should be fun. All right, you guys, appreciate the support. I hate to beg. Like, comment, and subscribe to Mark Rogers TV. I believe we're worth it and deliver the top-notch in discussion, debate, and analysis of college football. See you guys soon.